Let's take a look under the hood of Photoshop by setting some preferences. On the Mac platform, preferences are under your Application menu, which in this case is Photoshop, and Preferences. On Windows, it's under Edit and at the bottom, Preferences. So if I choose General, in the General Preferences, there is one or two handy settings I might recommend you turn on. The first one is Zoom with Scroll Wheel. And if I click it and hit OK, now I can use the wheel on my mouse to zoom in to this rainbow. And it's wheeling or zooming as I push my finger up on my mouse wheel. As I slide down, it zooms out, and my mouse is pretty fast, so it can jump on me rapidly. The issue this might create for people is I can't use my wheel to go up or down in the image anymore, only in or out. So instead of doing this a long way, clicking the hand tool and moving my screen, I'm going to use a power user trick and hold down just my space bar. On every tool, except when typing, because that would put in spaces, but on every tool in Photoshop, the space bar will temporarily give you the hand tool. So I can click and drag and move around to different spots of my image. To see the entire image again, I'll choose View, Fit on Screen, or I love Command-0 on the Mac or Control-0 on Windows. I always remember zero it out, show me the whole photo. Now I want to demonstrate this next setting before I turn it on. I'll go to my magnifying glass or zoom tool, and I'll click on this birdhouse. And if I click once or twice, now I want to zoom in more, and clicking is getting tiresome, so I'll hit Command plus 3 times, or on Windows, Control plus 3 times. But sadly, that only zoomed to the sky, and my intent was to zoom on the birdhouse. Let's go to View and Fit on Screen, and I'll show you how to make the zoom more intelligent if you like those shortcuts. Back to Edit Preferences General on Windows and Photoshop Preferences General on the Mac. And I'll turn off Zoom with Scroll Wheel because it doesn't quite feel natural enough to me. But I'll turn on Zoomed First Clicked Point to Center. I really wish this said first because that's exactly what it's doing, but it's a great setting. When I turn on Zoom Clicked Point to Center and click OK, the first time I click on this birdhouse, it centers it in my window. So now if I were to use View Zoom In, or my shortcuts, Command plus or Control plus to zoom in, it knows that I want to zoom to the birdhouse. It's very fast and efficient. And I will fit on screen and go to the next category of preferences that I might be likely to change. Again on Windows, it's Edit, Preferences, and Interface. On the Mac, Photoshop, Preferences, Interface. And in the interface settings, a few versions ago, Photoshop switched to a darker color theme. Does anybody know what is the ideal background color for viewing images? And I'll pause like I'm a cartoon character waiting for you to give me the right answer. There are two. The first correct answer is black because it gives a nice, sharp, stark background to view it on. But not every photo you hold will be viewed on a black background. So neutral gray is actually the preferred color space, a 50% gray for color correction experts, people who do color correction for a living. They actually work in a dark room. There are no windows. There are no lights. They can't wear any color but black because the colors of their clothing can interfere with their judgments when making color correction. Now, barring all of that, I tend to like to work in a bright, happy workspace. So in InDesign and Illustrator, I immediately go to the lightest setting for interface. And if I click OK, you'll see all the panels and tools get this nice light gray, maybe around a 10 or 20% gray. However, that isn't the best contrast for photos, so Photoshop is the one application where I will go back to Preferences and Interface and leave it on this neutral gray. It's ideal and it's recommended. Now the last setting that I may have you change is the user interface font size. UI is user interface. If I take a look at this, small is for all of the text that Photoshop is displaying to you. So for example, I'm on the eyedropper tool and sample size, that text. If I'm on a very large monitor, at home I run a 30-inch monitor, and my screen resolution is 1900 by 1600, making all of the type very tiny for me. So I often like the medium or large UI or user interface. If I choose large, I will have to quit Photoshop, and I'll click OK and exit or quit Photoshop, and the next time I launch it, it will be larger for the options bar and other portions of the user interface. So here we go. Now, if I look at the selection tool, there's feather nice and large. If I go back to the eyedropper tool, much bigger, the sample size of point sample. But for the sake of this recording, I do all of my video recordings at a resolution of 1280 by 720, so the font sizes are plenty big for me. So I'm going to go back to Preferences and Interface and set that to small. I will have to start Photoshop again. The last setting I want to show to change here is Show Channels in Color. Now, color channels are where your red, green, and blue is stored. If that's on and I click OK, and I open my recent file of Klamath Falls through File, Open Recent, and take a look at my Channels panel, I can click on red, it's in red. Click on green, it's in green, and blue is in blue, or click the letters RGB to go back to color. Back to Preferences and Interface, if you don't want them in color, you can turn that off, and now you just get shades of gray, which actually is a handy little trick to go straight to grayscale from the best contrast of one of these shots. I really often tend to like the green for contrast, but in this one the red might be a little bit better, although a little bit noisy. So we'll finish off with a newer setting. In Photoshop Preferences, Sync Settings, or Edit Preferences, Sync Settings, you can now sync all of your Creative Cloud application settings to Adobe's cloud. So if I were to log on as myself, training at onlineinstruct.com, or insert your username here, it will save all the preferences I change, swatches, styles, actions, everything that you see here. And if you're on a machine that isn't logged on as you, it'll tell you there's a conflict. The setting on this machine isn't the one on the cloud. Would you like to use the one on the cloud, or would you like to keep the one on the new local machine you're running? So this is just my first intro to the preferences of Photoshop. I will cover other preferences off and on as they're appropriate for the topic I'm talking about. But for now, you've seen General, Interface, and the newer Sync settings to the Adobe Creative Cloud. I will click OK, and now Photoshop will behave better with ideal settings for me.